In this episode of ICS Connects, I'm talking to Steve Clark, and we talk about the importance of speech-to-text captioning in the meetings and events industry as we're trying to get more inclusive to a much broader audience. So listen in and let's explore the future of exchange. Hello everyone and welcome back to ICS Connect. I'm here today with Steve Clark, the chairman of the board for the Global Alliance of Speech-to-Text Captioning, and also a real-time captioner, still doing the groundwork, and he's based in Washington, D.C. Welcome to ICS Connect, Steve.
Hi, Matthias. Thank you for having me.
Steve, aside from what I just told the audience about you, do you want to tell us a little bit more about your background, what it is you do, and kind of like what speech-to-text captioning is all about?
Sure. For me, I started in college in 1983, and at that time I was working on getting my degree as a court stenographer. So if you've ever seen on television the person who sits in front of the judge in the courtroom with that funny looking little machine with the fingers flying along the keyboard taking down the testimony, that's what I got my degree in. And I spent my first 12 years as a court stenographer or a court reporter. While I was working doing that, I was approached by a company here in Washington, D.C. I was living in New Hampshire at the time, and they were looking for people to do broadcast captioning, so closed captioning on television. So I accepted the position after 12 years as a court reporter and moved to the D.C. area to be retrained to do court reporting. I did that to do broadcast captioning. And I did that for almost 10 years. And then I left and started my own company, which we were intent on providing in-stadium captioning for sporting events. And we gradually built up the company and have now, I believe, 12 different professional and college level teams that we provide in-stadium captioning for. So if you go to see a baseball game or a football game or a soccer match, and you're in the stands and you have hearing loss, you can read the captions either on the video board or even on your cell phone. You can read it on the team's app. So everything that's being spoken in the stadium is being captioned in real time. So 1 to 2 seconds after the words are spoken, you will see them appear for anyone who needs to read those captions. After being on my own with the company for about 10 years, I was acquired by another company who kept me on to continue to do training and to continue to do captioning, which is what I do now. During that period, the Global Alliance of Speech-to-Text Captioning was created by me as well as 2 other stenographic captioners. And our vision is universal accessibility to the spoken word via all forms of captioning. And our mission is to be the leading professional authority on speech-to-text captioning, representing all captioners, consumers, and industry. So we have as members people who produce captions the way I do, using the stenograph machine. We have folks who use their voice to create captions, where they repeat everything they're hearing and add punctuation and add speaker IDs and add environmental cues that will help the person who can't hear what is being said. And we also have members from industry who represent not only those who develop the software that's used by stenographic and voice captioners, but also ASR, or automatic speech recognition captioning. We have members who are consumers, those who use our services. So the majority of them have some form of hearing loss, whether they are deaf or hard of hearing. And we have educators, we have students, and we are truly global. We have on our board members from the US, one member who just completed her term who was from Canada. We have a gentleman from Spain who is on our board, and we have a woman from Australia who is also on our board. And we have members, one from South America, one from Poland who recently joined us, and then the remainder are here in the US or in Canada.
Okay. Tell us a little bit more why speech-to-text captioning is so important right now or in general.
Sure. Well, in addition to anyone who has hearing loss, captioning is really used by folks who are maybe in a noisy environment. In pre-COVID days, when we would gather in large groups, be it in an airport or in a bar or in any setting where the television is on and you're having difficulty hearing, the captions are on and they help you obviously in that noisy setting. But they're also really beneficial for anyone where the language that's being captioned is not their native language. So if you are watching a program in English and English is your second or third language, it's been found that you benefit not only from being able to hear what's being said, but from reading the captions at the same time. Captions are also very helpful for anyone learning to read. So school-age children in elementary or primary school are going to benefit from having the captions on as well.
I have to say I always put captions on when I watch Netflix, anything in a foreign language, even if I speak the language, it's
Right.
kind of really helpful for me to kind of understand more and kind of like get the correlation between the word and what's been spoken. So I completely relate to what you just said in that sense. Yeah.
Yes, I do the same. If I'm watching any program or movie that was or stars British actors, I struggle a little bit with the British accent, and I have a friend in England who has told me the same. When he watches American television, he also puts the captions on for that reason.
I don't think I would have gotten through Game of Thrones without closed captioning. Like it was very difficult sometimes.
Well, as a captioner,
Okay.
we love hearing that.
Good. For the audience here, maybe kind of like closed captioning is, or captioning is used kind of like quite a bit also kind of like in online environments right now for Zoom and so on for the online meetings. And a lot of it is actually usually AI generated, I assume, rather than a person sitting there. So kind of like, how do you feel that kind of like impacts your industry, and what is your stand on that kind of?
Well, my stand on AI, and this is the stance of the Global Alliance as well, is that we welcome any form of captioning as long as it produces quality captions that are equal to any other form. So we are currently developing an assessment and certification that will be used to test the quality of captioning. And it will be method agnostic. So when someone takes that test and provides us with their results or their transcript, if you will, we won't know how the captions were created because we truly want to be open to all methods of captioning. So as far as the AI, you're right that there are platforms that AI is the only available way that you can get the captions integrated into the pod. But there are always ways that you can use an additional platform or an additional third-party link to provide those captions. AI has come a long way. It's gotten better. I started school, as I said, in 1983. And back then I was told you're entering, not by those running the school, but by others, you're entering a dying profession with recording and with, at that time we didn't really know of speech recognition. You're going to be replaced. I'm still here all these years later. And there are so many things, Matthias, that need to be captioned, as you say, online content, webinars, Zoom meetings, that to say only one method is acceptable is unfair to those who need the captions. Again, we are all about quality. We want quality captions to be the rule. But there is so much work out there now, much of it that is not being covered because there aren't enough human captioners. But we are increasing the number of human captioners, especially as voice captioning has improved and the quality that you are seeing from that has gone up. I will tell you that a steno captioner like I am, who has been doing this even just for a couple of years, will give you on a regular basis between 98.5 and 99% accuracy. And that is often at speeds between 225 to 300 words a minute, and with captions being done in real time. Now, voice is at that same level frequently and constantly improving. And AI at times is at that level as well. Even those who do produce and provide AI captioning will tell you that there are some settings where AI is not going to do as well as a human captioner. And just one example, I captioned recently a roundtable panel discussion on Zoom, and there were 8 people on screen. I knew who those 8 were ahead of time, so each time one of them spoke and I saw the Zoom box light up for that person, I was able to enter the keystroke to identify the person by name. That's something that AI isn't always going to be able to do. And in a setting where you're going to have accents, where you have someone maybe with a speech impediment, where you have a lot of those environmental cues that I spoke of, laughter, applause, any kind of background noise. Nowadays in Zoom, I'm constantly putting in telephone ringing, dog barking, children speaking, something like that, because the person who is deaf or hard of hearing can't hear that happening in the background, but everyone else reacts to it. So we need to catch those kind of parenthetical bits of information. So AI, it's improving, and it is going to continue to make inroads, but there is just so much that needs to be captioned. I, as a human captioner, I don't have any fear of AI, and there are actually ways that AI and the human can work together to produce captions.
I can see that. I think that it's so interesting because so many industries we talk about, we are so fearful that technology will replace us. Not just your industry. I think in the meeting plannings industry and kind of live events versus virtual events, we always have this constant fear that technology will be a new alternative and a more attractive alternative, and we always find out the human kind of interaction and the human kind of like what we can still contribute as people is still a different experience overall.
Exactly right. We can't be Luddites and smash the machine because they're just going to build a bigger and better machine.
Correct. That's exactly it. Where I find captioning really interesting from our industry conferences is kind of it could create this environment, or it does create this environment of inclusivity, because we have stopped for most of our conferences the translation booth and the simultaneous translation, and it's sometimes really difficult also to consider kind of like how many languages do you translate into and so on. But I think captioning alone already helps people whose first language isn't English to follow a presentation more, and you're basically covering a whole group of people, not just one language. You cover anybody who might have difficulties understanding, and kind of like the written word helps. On that note, however, lots of our conferences are very specific. So you would have a medical conference and so on. So how do you deal with something like that, where you kind of like lots of the language and the kind of specific kind of terms are not necessarily terms that people would know on an everyday basis? Do you have specialized captioners in that sense, or how do you read up on it? How do you work with something like that?
It's a little bit of both of what you mentioned, in addition to asking the host to send us whatever can be sent ahead of time. So, for example, where you talked about a conference that is medical, and let's say it's specifically cardiologists' conference. Obviously, we would do some research on our end and make sure we have all the different dictionary keystrokes entered for cardiology terms. Those of us who went to school when I did in the 80s, we had anatomy and physiology, medical terminology classes to help us to better understand those terms. But like any other profession, the longer you do something, the better you should get at it. And you do tend to specialize a little bit. I mentioned the stadium captioning. Sports captioning is something that I have sort of specialized in. Additionally, theater captioning is something that is happening a lot now, and I've specialized in that before theaters have had to shut down during COVID. But specifically for the conference that you mentioned, the medical conference, we would ask the host to provide us with the names and bios of those who are going to be speaking, so that right there we have the names of whatever school the doctor may have attended, whatever papers he may have written, which we can then try to research and get some more information. So it's really important that we know ahead of time what the topic is going to be. And when it's something that specialized, we really reach out to get that kind of information so that we can enter those keystrokes into our real-time dictionary so they do translate properly.
And now let me ask a very naive question in a sense. Where is the overlap between captioning and translation? For example, I said, okay, you're captioning my English conference with captions in English. How about captioning in a different language? Like, where's that overlap? Do I hire a translator now, or a captioner that's also a translator? What what's the kind of like the qualification for doing that now?
Yep. There are a few options. We have captioners who in this industry can listen in one language and caption in another. I know a gentleman who is fluent in both English and Spanish, and he can caption in both languages. So he could be listening to this conference or this conversation in English and producing captions in Spanish. There are others who listen in their native language and caption only in their native language. Another option is to have someone who is translating the spoken word, and that comes into my ear through earphones, and I hear it in English. So the person is listening in Spanish, speaking it to me in English, and I'm then captioning it in English. And then finally, an option that we have used that actually has met with not only success, but approval by many those who are using the captioning is there are some platforms where I can send my captions to the platform in English, and I can choose from one of 40 different languages that it will be translated into using an online translation program. And we had that come up recently where we were told last minute we would really like this to also be in Spanish. And of course, there are few Spanish captioners in the US, so it was hard to find someone within 10 minutes notice. But I suggested, let's try this other option. And so we were able to display the captions on the screen in both languages. English I was producing, Spanish it was being translated from my English produced captions. And the consumer who watched them said they were actually pretty good, that there are some things that obviously a human mind would have translated differently, but that Google or whatever platform it is did a very good job of translating it into that other language as well.
Yeah, I think it's so important to kind of keep that in mind as we talk about more inclusive conferences, and we talk about people with hearing loss, or just hard of hearing in general, and then people from different cultures. All of this, like this, could be so helpful.
You know,
Sorry.
I mentioned to you about the theater captioning, and I was doing that on site. I would travel frequently around the country providing captioning for different theater performances, whether it was something like, I think one of the last ones I did may have been The Wizard of Oz, where the full script is already produced, and I just need to go through and put that into a form that works with my captioning software. I'm actually sitting in the audience, usually tucked away in the corner, and there is a screen that is right in front of the stage where the captions will appear. So they're truly, in this case, open captions. And the theater will advertise it as that, open caption production on this date. There are other ways that you can do theater captioning, but that's one example. But with that, it's something where the transcript has been produced by me ahead of time, or the real-time file. And then I'm listening and I'm just hitting one key at a time that feeds the entire line across the screen. And then if someone ad-libs, I can fill that in real time and then go back to the captions that are produced there in the theater. I know we had touched on the theater. I just thought that was an interesting.
No, I think it's very relatable in that way too. Let me just change gears slightly. One of the things about captioning is kind of like you now add, if you add it after that to a session, you have a session online, all of this with captioning. Does that change anything in the way a session is searchable now? So now that we actually kind of, let's say I put a session on my online library or online, it's captioned, people look for something on Google. Does the search kind of, does it pick up those words that are in the captioning, or kind of like, does it help?
Yeah, what you're describing here, Matthias, is called post-production captioning.
Okay.
And so this is where you take a recorded event and produce a transcript of that event. And then using a different type of software, post-production software, you can time the captions to appear in sync with what's being spoken. If this were being captioned right now in real time, it would appear with a 1 to 2 second delay, because the words have to be spoken. The human or the captioner or caption system has to process those words, and then they appear on the screen. Usually they appear word by word and they scroll across the screen. With post-production, they typically pop on the screen, and they can be moved so that you're not covering additional information, resized for certain settings to make sure that they fit nicely with what's on the screen. My understanding is that when you post something online, there is a way that you can note that it has closed captions. So when someone does a search for it, they will find that. But when you go to the document as well, the event, it should also show the CC or similar type of icon to let viewers know that there will be captions.
I was more referring to the words actually once they're written out. I was wondering if they could now be searchable words now, kind of like making it more easy to find that talk or that.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
If you were to be looking at the actual event, I'm not sure about that. That's a good question. I would have to research that, whether you can search within the event for searchable words.
Good. I just felt like it would be another benefit, but yeah, thank you
Certainly.
for that. But what you just mentioned, kind of like the closed captioning, how it works, could we maybe do a quick demo? Kind of like your captioner, of course, so kind of real-time captioning, and see how it works on Zoom. So guide us through it.
I will. Well, thank you for the opportunity to do that. As I mentioned, there is ASR, which is where the computer, the automatic speech recognition, would be listening and producing captions. And then there is what's called voice captioning, which is also sometimes referred to as re-speaking or revoicing, where the captioner is listening and repeating everything that's being heard, and the software is trained to understand that captioner's voice. And then there's the method that I use, which is using this little machine, which is a stenograph machine. So as I'm doing this, I'm listening to everything that's being said, and I'm entering either a word, a syllable, or even a group of words with one keystroke, which is what allows me to caption sometimes up to 300 words a minute. It also allows me to have speaker IDs so that I can identify the person who is speaking.
Okay.
Okay, so if you want to speak, I'll caption you, and then we should see those captions as long as you've turned on the show subtitle feature of Zoom.
Perfect. So for everybody out there, let's get that trying. I'm just going to quickly talk a little bit off the cuff. And one of the things I did before this session is researching a little bit about what issue actually hearing loss is in the world. And we look at right now that according to WHO, around 466 million people worldwide have hearing loss. And the number is expected to grow to 900 million by 2050. So speech to text captioning is really something that can address this issue and create a much more inclusive environment for our audience, be it online, be it offline, be it live events. Really something that we should be looking much more into, and I think it's not quite on top of all of our minds right now. But as you read along with this, you might realize how beneficial it is, especially if somebody speaks quickly or with an accent, even though might not be that bad anymore.
Okay, so I'll stop right there. And you were seeing those on your end with the, as Zoom calls it, the subtitle feature.
Good. I tried to read while you were talking, but that really would have thrown me off. I'll read it later.
Yeah, it is a difficult thing to speak and read the captions at the same time. Yeah. As I was telling you before we got started here, it's even more difficult for me as the captioner to think of something to say, to speak it, and then to caption it at the same time. I actually did that recently for a group that asked me to present to them about captioning, and they were all deaf and hard of hearing. So I captioned the entire event, and it really takes a lot of concentration to be able to do both at the same time. Thank you for the chance to show this.
I can totally see that, and thank you for demoing it to us. And I hope people learned a little bit about closed caption or captioning today. What's the difference between captioning and closed captioning? I always wanted to know that.
That's a very good question. It's interesting that if I tell someone I do captioning, they most of the time don't know what I mean. But if I say I do closed captioning, instantly they know what it means, because everyone thinks of it as closed captioning. Yeah. Closed just means that. Just that, it's closed. The captions are there, but they're hidden, and they only appear if you turn them on. So if you think about when you watch a television program, you have to hit the CC button or go to your menu and choose to watch them. Those are closed captions. They're embedded, but they're hidden. And Zoom does make them truly closed. Open captions are almost like subtitles. So if you're watching a movie in a language that is one language and they want the captions to appear in English or whatever language, they're almost like subtitles. Those are open captions.
Great. I really appreciate that explanation. And Steve, thank you so much for today. I really learned a lot.
Great.
I hope the audience did as well. I think one of the good things coming out of this whole crisis is to really look into some of these things a little bit closer and really seeing how we can serve our clientele better. And I'm really grateful that you explained captioning to us today, and I think there's a lot of valuable insight. Sorry, I just want to, before, and I'm not going to cut you off, but can say your final words, but also please let us know kind of where people can go to if they are interested in hiring a captioner, and how they can find you online.
Yes. If you go to our website, which is speech-to-text-captioning.org, you will find out more information about the Global Alliance, who we are, what we do, and different opportunities. If you're interested in also joining us, we have different types of membership depending on whether you are a professional captioner, a retired captioner, a student, a consumer. But you're also going to find there, if you go to our News and Documents tab, the information that I just gave you describing the different forms of captioning. So we have a document there that explains what all the different types of captioning are. We also have a document there that helps you to understand what you need to look for when hiring a captioner. So we have a decision tree that if it's not there yet, we're putting it into its final form, where you will be able to enter the type of event you are hosting, what you would like to get from the event, whether it's on-site or remote, how many people will be watching, all those different factors that go into your event. And then at the end, it will give you a recommendation for the type of captioning that we think would work best with your particular event. But I want to thank you, Mathias. This has been a lot of fun. I love the opportunity to talk about captioning and to really explain, I think, in maybe non-technical terms, in layman's terms, what it is we do, because so often I think people have no idea how captions are produced. And it used to just be human-based, and now we have different ways that humans produce captions, but we have ways that they're being produced also with automatic speech recognition. So I really appreciate you letting me do this.
Thank you, Steve, and I appreciate your time. Thank you
You're
so
welcome.
much. And thanks everyone for listening.